Hello, and welcome to the Cosmere Deep Dive Podcast.
The gasp.
Today we are not doing a traditional episode. Instead, we're going to cover Cosmere 101. Basically cover the basics of this whole podcast thing we're doing. So I am your host, Mike. Joining me are Craig.
Hello.
And Tori.
Hello.
Seth
She
may be
didn't
joining
say
us
hello,
later.
Internet.
He is
It's so
currently running
weird.
late. Or he may not show up at all.
Dude.
Who knows? Good thing is usually how we start things off. Craig, you want to get us
Original.
going on that?
Do I have a good thing?
Don't have
I think I'll mention I've been playing a lot of Euro Truck Simulator
Euro
too.
Truck Simulator. So I started logging
Because
all of
that's
the
what I
good
do,
things
drive
at one
trucks
point. This would be a good opportunity
just
to...
driving around.
But it's been out for a long
Get back
time, and
and do
you
that.
get most of
I
Europe
can find
finally. It's still missing like Eastern Europe and Spain, but other than that, it has a lot of stuff now, and it's a lot of fun.
Spain feels like an odd occlusion to that.
Well,
Occlusion?
they started with Germany, and they basically have been spiraling out from the center of Germany.
The
So
blockage or
they
closing
just
of a
added
blood
Italy
vessel.
recently.
I
Weird.
think he meant exclusion.
Okay. Tori.
Well, if we're
Fine.
talking about games that have been out for a while,
It was like 3
and
microphones
aren't
ago.
really new anymore, I've been playing a lot of Breath of the Wild, like a lot. Like there was, new DLC happening, and so I got back into that and have been playing obsessively.
Yeah, what did they add?
Oh well, there's I don't know honestly because I've just been playing all of it, and like confession time, I never finished it when I started it last year because I had a lot of stuff going on in real life. I'm a librarian, and the summer reading program happened, and that's soul crushing and all consuming,
Hamisha,
and it's
thanks for
really
the follow.
hard. So I stopped and
Make new alerts and stuff.
just got back into it.
Maybe I'll be
Okay.
Yeah, things
bold
are probably
enough
the
to
opposite of you, where
actually
summer is the
animate
most
them
busy
myself and hand draw
compared to,
stuff.
I guess, other times of the year.
Yes, actually, for a librarian, that is
That'd be
the
fun.
biggest. Like we
Just
started
use Navi,
planning for
pretend
this
it's still
summer's activities in January, and we're already talking about the budget for next summer. And
Wow.
it takes a lot of forward thinking, which I'm not good at. So it's big. It's stressful. I don't want to talk about it. Breath of the Wild, though, that's awesome.
Right, we're talking about good things, not bad things.
So I actually have owned Breath of the Wild since last summer, and I barely played it, and I really need to get back into it.
For shame.
And I'm getting
The
glared at
reason
now
I
by my
picked it
wife
up-
because I just mentioned that I've had this game and I haven't played it because she bought it for me.
The reason I started playing it was because of one of the kids in the library, a little boy. I think he's 6 years old. I don't know, but
Hope he's not
um,
listening. He'll be like
loves
12 by now.
Zelda, and I have
Dang.
a Triforce tattoo, and so he saw that and had to tell me all about Breath of the Wild. And oh, Miss Tori, have you played that game? And I had to tell him yes, but I didn't finish it, and he rebuked me strongly for not finishing the game. So shout out to little boy Edward who told me to play my games.
Shamed by a 6-year-old.
Hey, whatever works.
All right, so my good thing this week is a TV show that only ran for 2 seasons, but it was so good. It's called Reaper, and it's so there's this kid who on the first episode turns 21, and he finds out that his parents, before he was born, sold his soul to the devil. So now on his 21st birthday, and for the rest of his life, he has to hunt escaped souls from hell and return them.
Is this live action?
Yes, and it's so good.
Sounds like an anime premise.
Well, it's not played entirely straight. It's more of an action comedy kind of thing.
Okay.
Did you ever watch Chuck?
Briefly.
Okay, it's basically the
No
same
idea what
thing,
anyone's
except
talking about.
replace supercomputer in his head with
Chuck.
bounty hunter for the devil.
Nice.
the cast is amazing. Specifically, the supporting cast. We have Ray Wise as the devil.
Nick Cage does.
Ray Wise being literally the best person to have ever played the devil on anything
Ghost
ever.
Rider.
And Tyler Labine as the best friend Sock. I became a fan of his from this and like continued throughout his career. You may also know him as the voice of one of the guys on that one animated show that I'm now blanking on. Voltron, the new Voltron on Netflix.
Okay.
He was
Which
also
character? I love the new Voltron.
Chunk, I believe.
Chunk.
Okay.
Like
okay.
from Goonies.
Yeah. Hunk, I think it is.
No, Chunk is right.
Yeah, the name is Hunk, but I knew what you were talking about.
Okay.
Oh,
well,
it was Chunk.
It's
I mean,
better
Hunk.
if I'm right than if I'm wrong. There's also he was in Tucker and Dale versus Evil. Thank you.
Oh, I know that one.
So he was the redneck that wasn't Alan Tudyk.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was also very, very good. He was also in Rise of the Planet of the Apes. He was patient zero of the super flu that killed a lot of the humans. So that's my good thing, is Reaper. And I guess, by extension, Tyler Labine. What is the Cosmere? So that's a question
talking
that has
about
actually
Cosmere now.
many answers. The first of which is it's a series of book series. Interconnected at the meta level.
Series.
But each of these individual series is pretty solidly standalone. There's Elantris, which we've started. There's Mistborn, which has 6 books out
right
now. There is Warbreaker, which is just a single standalone book. There is the Stormlight Archives, which is up to 3, but will eventually be 10. They're supposed to be 10.
Not counting novellas.
There's a ton of short stories and novellas that are all currently collected in the Arcanum Unbounded.
Wish I had my books on me.
Which
I just
I
hold them up.
definitely recommend picking up if you're at all interested in the Cosmere, and I guess you are if you're listening to what we're saying.
Although after reading some of the other Sanderson's works in the Cosmere, you don't want to start with that one.
Right. I mean, some of it is fine and
Craig and
spoiler-free,
his opinions of
and it actually
starting on
does say
Warbreaker.
before the start of each.
Well,
of each
they're
thing,
saying
like,
not to
what
start with
you should
Arcanum
have read
Unbounded,
ahead of
which
time
makes sense.
to not be spoiled on stuff. And there's also White Sand, which is being released as 3 graphic novels. The second one just came out, and I think that's all the Cosmere stuff.
Right now, yes.
Did I miss anything?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Should have worked more on the layout.
So
last
all
night.
of this, all
Nobody
of these
reads
separate
White Sand. Did he
stories
not mention White Sand?
take place in a shared universe. And I do mean universe. These are all on like different planets.
I looked at the pictures
in
of
this
White
universe.
Sand.
And it's possible to then travel between them.
He did, okay.
In varying ways. And the other big thing that this has is, in addition to like shared geography, I guess, there's the shared history of a fairly major event that sort of set off all of the things that are currently happening. There's a shared underlying magic system. Like each individual world and even some like localized places on those worlds have their own specialized magic system, but sort of the underlying rules are universal. Is this
different
is
magic
this making
systems?
sense?
It makes sense to me, but I already knew all this.
They're all like intertwined. They're all
Same.
Okay.
have similarities.
But I think
then-
it's a good description.
All right. So yeah, some of those. I mean, what do we want to go into from here? We could talk about ad nauseum. We could talk about
ad nauseum, ad nauseum.
identity and connection and all of that.
Well, I think we should
Investiture.
keep it simple. This
I
is
remember
sort
when
of
I
what
first
we're
listened
going
to this,
to
I had
direct
no idea what
you
those words meant.
listeners. Like, here's where to start. So I don't think we really need to get into Adonalism. I'm going to pronounce it wrong. I apologize. It's what I do.
Adonalsium? Oh my
Or your
gosh, he
audiobooker,
pronounced
how is it
Adonalsium wrong.
pronounced?
It's like
yeah,
this.
he
So we
said
need
it
to keep
nearly
a
right.
tally
It's
of
ad
Craig
nauseum.
mispronouncing
Sometimes
things.
it's ad nauseum, but
Definitely not what Craig said.
I like ad nauseum.
Okay.
I don't know. But yeah, I think we should avoid getting too much into it. This is sort of a little what to expect type thing. So, talking about overall what books we're going to cover in which order,
Okay.
and maybe how they could be related in some way, but in a very generic sense.
So, as far as order goes,
All right, so I guess I should kind of explain what we're doing here. I am a co-host of a podcast called the Cosmere Deep Dive Podcast, and this is me listening to older episodes of our podcast. I'm actually not in like the first 3 or 4 episodes. I joined in pretty close to the beginning, but so the idea is that we read all these books by Brandon Sanderson that all take place in his universe called the Cosmere. And I am slowly going through the books as a first-time reader. So they get my ideas as a fresh reader. You know, what do I think is going to happen? What's going on behind the scenes here and there? You know, who do you think the secret murderer is and stuff like that? And I participate in the first half of the show, but then after that they kicked me out. And then they go into the spoilers, which will encompass every Cosmere work, including the one that we're currently reading, and all of them that have been published, because the other 3 hosts have read all of these Cosmere books, but I have not. So I'm reading them slowly, giving my thoughts, and then they kick me off and they do a spoiler section without me. Now, at the time of this recording that we're listening to now, the last published Cosmere book was Oathbringer. And in the live recordings of the podcast, we just finished Oathbringer. So now everything that they'll be talking about in the spoiler sections is no longer a spoiler for me. So now I can go back and listen to the old episodes and hear what these guys said behind my back. I guess asterisk something white sand. But that's the gist of it. So I'm going to be listening to the spoiler sections for the first time, and you're getting my live reaction to that. So, all right, back to this.
I don't know if we've mentioned this before, but we are sticking to publication order, and I would like to explain my reasoning for that.
Asterisk white sand.
After a certain point in the published order, the timeline goes wonky.
This is 4 or 5 years ago?
All of these things
when did we start
take
this?
place roughly sequentially in publication order.
That's a good question.
Right up until Way of Kings starts. And then it sort of jumps to Mistborn Era 2 as the next thing published, and then it jumps back to Stormlight 2.
Keep a very good track of all this stuff when we started
Mistborn
out, so
Era
I'm not
2,
sure.
Alloy of Law is...
You see when the Discord server was created,
after,
actually. That's probably the best.
Way of Kings. There's also a published short story of Sixth of the Dusk that is supposed to be the furthest along timeline-wise of anything published so far. And then there's also another like prequel series that is supposed to be published eventually called Dragonsteel that will be set well before the start of any of this. So timeline is screwy, and publication order to me feels like the only reasonable way to do things. So we'll be covering things in the order that, if you're like me and you sort of got in pretty early on
Craig
all this
joined
stuff,
the Discord server on
you get
December 12th,
information
2017.
we got information.
So I guess early
in that
2018
same
is
order.
like when they
So
started.
why don't we also talk about the format of our podcast itself, so people know what to expect?
Sure.
Like, what is our goal? What are we doing here?
I mean, mostly what I'm doing is making the podcast that I wanted to listen to and couldn't find, which is sort of a slow, in-depth, chapter by chapter, or in the case of Elantris, 3 chapter at a time, reread and discussion and like in-depth review and sort of talking about all of the interesting things.
The conversation between Craig and Mike about who they're going to invite onto the show.
Get more information, seeing
and
how
Tori
it relates back
joins
to
12/19 1 week later.
all of that sort of.
I
rolled
am
up
the
into
woman's perspective.
About an hour a week.
Right, but should we also talk about our fourth member who's currently not with us?
Yes. So Seth covers. Seth is reading all of this stuff for the first time, and part of what I wanted
Seth
to
is
do
the
was
original
get him
Dave
into this and sort of get his initial reader take, because not knowing
Seth joined
a lot
January
of this stuff
13th. Joined the Discord
means
server.
that he's going to have
like
a
January
much different
early
view
2018
of things than, say, Craig or I or Tori will have, since we have read all of these things, or Tori is very shortly going to have read all of these things.
And I've certainly dived through the wiki for quite a bit, and I've done a little bit of searching through the Word of Brandon's.
Of Adam.
Yeah,
Word of Sanderson.
Those are a lot harder to dig through.
They are, and I've done a little bit of it, mostly through the wiki.
One thing I definitely don't want to go into,
Craig relying on the copper
this
mine.
episode, is talking about Hoyd, who is a very important character and will be discussed at length in the future. But for now, let's just stay away from him.
Look forward to that.
Stay away from Hoyd.
Yeah,
Good advice.
That's he'll get brought up a lot. So Tori, is there anything Cosmere wide that you'd like to focus on for a little bit?
Putting me on the spot here.
Yes.
I can't think of anything.
Okay. Do you have any questions, maybe about the underlying magic system, any of the history, anything in that neighborhood?
No. Sorry.
So I think there's something I can
The Way
bring
of
up.
Kings is about the cheese from the King, the Mice, and the Cheese.
I don't believe this goes into spoiler territory. If it does, please stop me. One of the concepts that the characters have of their universe and their study of the universe is the fact that the universe is split into 3 different realms.
Yes, geomatic theory is what that specific thing is called.
Right. And I'm pretty sure this is early enough in a number of different stories touches upon this, but essentially things are divided into the physical, cognitive, and spiritual?
Correct.
Which is things exist in different capacities among the 3 different what's the term? Worlds.
I'm appreciating how much research Craig has actually done on Cosmere,
but they also
since this episode
all interact in some way, and they all have a different
really got
degree
into
of
it and
importance
figured out all
based
these
on what
intricacies
they do
and
and
stuff.
how they apply to a particular world or story. But overall, this is an important, I would say, connection between all the various different worlds and stories.
Yeah, I can pause with my keyboard.
These 3 different realms exist.
Yes, and it gets touched on in a lot of the different, I want to say like almost every work touches on it at least a little bit, even if it doesn't outright state it. But I would say the ones that actually like deal with it the most directly and you get the most information from it would be Mistborn Secret History and so far Stormlight books 2 and 3. Words of Radiance and Oathbringer. Like deal with.
Although it was first mentioned in Way of Kings. Jasna
right, you got
covers it in her teaching.
Well, before that, it was mentioned in The Emperor's Soul.
That's a good point.
Yeah, I mean, there are mentions of this stuff sprinkled throughout. There are references to it even wider. But yeah, like the bulk of the information that we have comes from primarily Mistborn Secret History, and then Stormlight 2 and 3. And I guess a little bit from Edge Dancer.
I guess we could talk a little bit about Adonalsium.
You had it and you lost it.
I know!
Adonalsium.
But yeah, we could talk a little bit about Adonalsium.
All right.
Oh, he's getting it.
Adonalsium. Once upon a time, there was a god whose name was Adonalsium. and at least 17 people got together and built a god bomb and killed him.
Okay, I got a little update in the Discord server. The first episode was released on May 4th, 2018. Yes, that May 4th. All right, so I was thinking as I'm listening, I'm probably going to do it kind of in the format of the show, where I'll try to keep my commentary spoiler-free until the spoiler section. So even people can actually read along for the first time and watch the review of the podcast here and still stay spoiler-free. And I'll put up a sign that says spoilers when we get to the spoiler section of the podcast. So, yeah, I'm going to keep my commentary of the spoiler-free section will also be spoiler-free, basically. All right.
Shenanigans ensued, and then we continue with our story.
Wait, is that all we're going to say?
Although, adding to that, Twitch chat may contain spoilers if you're reading chat. Okay.
I mean, without getting into spoilers, that's about all I can say. Even saying that is a little bit spoilery.
Things I figured. Well, you could just edit this later. I figured mentioning that 16 people picked up pieces of the destroyed god and then went their own ways.
Do we want to get into like a shardic breakdown? Because I can do that.
Shardic?
Well, no, that's what I'm saying. Just
splintering.
Having a general idea of like, well, what is this leading to? Why am I mentioning this? The reason I'm mentioning this is that the different quote-unquote gods, because they're not actually gods, but they're pieces of that god.
The shards are loaded. The count's 3 shards and 2 anti-shards, and the infield shard rule is in effect.
They have a particular aspect of that god.
Right.
And it sort of becomes who they are. And they're on different worlds that we have stories about.
A lot of the issues that come up, I believe, come up because each of these shards is just a single aspect of this original god's personality, but not balanced by the other aspects.
Yeah.
And so yeah, like their whole outlook eventually becomes this one specific thing. And yeah, problems ensue. So do we want to start in on spoilers yet, or because I'm kind of running out of juice here.
Well, okay,
don't worry.
So just to recap,
say.
Essentially we're going to get together in our podcast each episode. We're going to have our newer person, Seth, recap the things that he has read in the latest book, currently Elantris, but eventually it'll be the other works in publication order. He'll tell us his thoughts, where he thinks the story's going, what he's learned, his overall experience, and then, of course, we kick him off, we make fun of him, and we talk about greater implications amongst the rest of Sanderson's works, including what Seth is currently reading. But we can find connections and just go to town from that.
Yeah, so the second half of each normal episode is going to be full spoilers. First half is going to be no spoilers with the exception of up to as far as Seth has read. Like, obviously we'll contain spoilers of things that happen in the chapters that we're reading.
Yep.
Without that, I don't know what we would do.
So are we telling Seth about the Cosmere? Does he know about the Cosmere?
I have given him a basic breakdown that is
do that for me. He's like, go listen to the Cosmere 101
literature and Marvel Cinematic Universe
and see me after class.
That is a fair assessment of this. That is the easy way to tell someone completely new what this is.
Like, each of these can be taken on its own. Say Elantris is the Hulk. You know, as a movie by itself, it's fine. It's also part of a larger thing. Mistborn would then be, I would say, Iron's Men.
That's kind of
There's
funny.
so many of them,
I
and
see what
it
you
just
did
keeps
there.
showing up. Then I'd probably go with...
It's also funny because Mistborn.
So I would definitely say Stormlight Archives is more Captain America because it does have more like you have the other characters popping in, but it's not Avengers. It stands alone still.
I would almost actually go with Thor, just because it is a little more, I guess, spacey. like a little more out there?
Yeah. Yeah. It's pretty out there.
Well, if you're looking at down to earth as in terms of Captain America, I was just thinking about Captain America: Civil War.
Right, I see your point.
And how it's essentially Avengers 2.5.
Yeah,
I get
with all
it.
the crossovers and things.
These aren't great analogies.
The whole point is that it's like Marvel Cinematic Universe, where there are connections between the different books, but you can also just watch them or read them on your own.
Correct.
Separately.
All right, how about this? What would you recommend that a new reader start with first?
Elantris.
I would say Mistborn. That's what I started on.
I would say any of the first Mistborn trilogy, if you're into trilogies, Warbreaker, if you would like a single standalone book, or The Emperor's Soul, if you prefer shorter works. I don't recommend starting with Stormlight, primarily because it is like a huge doorstopper, eventually 10-book fantasy series. Like if you were super into Wheel of Time, yeah, you'll love Stormlight. And even if you weren't, you'll probably still love Stormlight eventually, but that's not a great place to start.
Honestly,
Right.
That was kind of my experience with The Way of Kings. When I read the first book, I was like, oh man, this long. There's this depressed guy. It's a lot of it's long and it's like really deep, but like it's chasm deep. But after we did Era 2 Mistborn and we were getting back to Stormlight Archive, getting ready to read Words of Radiance, I was starting to get really excited to read Words of Radiance. It took a while for The Way of Kings to sink in and for me to like appreciate the characters and look forward to see what happens next. But like as we were getting into Words of Radiance, I was like, man, I really care about Kaladin and Shallan and Dalinar and all. You read Way of Kings in 10 days? I read 10 pages a day. You have to be prepared for Way of Kings for sure. And as far as my recommendation for what to read first, if you've never read anything by Brandon Sanderson, Elantris is honestly a decent start. If you want this short, but it doesn't really go into like the Cosmere stuff of the Cosmere. A lot of that stuff isn't really spelled out until later books. But it was a good book. I definitely enjoyed it when I first read it. I haven't reread any of the books yet. But Emperor's Soul is only like 50 pages. And if you want kind of details on how the magic system works and you want to see how Brandon writes strong female characters, you want to see how Brandon writes good character development, then Emperor's Soul is exceptional. If you want to read like a fun series of stories, Mistborn Era 1 for sure. I read 50 pages a week. That's why I read 10 pages. I read about 10 pages a day, not 10 pages a week.
And at the time of this recording, there's only 3 books that have been written.
Rhythm
so
of
far.
War hadn't been written yet. That's how old this is.
You can't even finish it yet. Yeah, I definitely second
you
your
still can. There's 4 out of 6
of Warbreaker.
Down.
That is something I recommend for people who don't have that much of a budget, because you can read Warbreaker free on Brandon Sanderson's website for free. He has posted the ebook there, and that's a great thing. If you want to sort of see what his writing style is, I think that's a great way to expose yourself without having a financial commitment. Of course, you can also go to your local library and pick up, Mistborn if they have it.
I see what you did there.
Yeah, that should have been Tori's line.
I got in there. Stolen.
I like that.
Let's see, what else?
And in terms of reading order, though, something else that I see brought up on the subreddit very often is like, which order should I read these things
Double Dip's
in?
great because it also has...
Because of the standalone nature, you're mostly
double
safe
meaning in swimming
with a particular series, just reading it. So Elantris sort of stands alone. Emperor's Soul technically takes place, I think, around the same time, maybe even... I think it takes place at the same time. Either way...
It's on the same world, but there's like no connection at all.
There's like no connection. So you're pretty much safe either way.
All
Mistborn, of course,
connection.
You read the first 3 books, and then you read Mistborn Series 2. It has its own order. It's easy enough to follow, just like Stormlight Archives. currently has 3 books, and you know which is book 1, book 2, book 3. You can basically read them in any order. One of the recommended orders I've seen is something like reading Elantris, Mistborn, and Warbreaker, followed by Stormlight Archives, like basically saving it for last. I've seen other people intermix them a bit, like read Stormlight Archives book 1, then Warbreaker, then Stormlight Archives book 2.
I would definitely recommend Warbreaker happening sometime before Words of Radiance, but I don't feel like it's super duper important when exactly.
I know I enjoyed reading Warbreaker just on its own because it is a quick standalone book, and then of course diving into Stormlight Archives just because it's so meaty and large, and I had the most foundation set for the Cosmere in general going into it.
Oh, I do want to mention at least one thing about Warbreaker. Brandon writes incredible action scenes. It's one of his strongest things as a writer. Warbreaker is very light on action for most of the book. So you will be missing that little aspect of Brandon's writing from Warbreaker. Otherwise, it's amazing. But
there's still some action.
There's a little.
There is.
But compared to like Mistborn, it's very light on the action.
I think Mistborn is a better showcase of that.
Yeah, I can get behind that. What would you say your favorite of these series is?
Mistborn Era 2 for Craig.
I have a special place in my heart for the original Mistborn trilogy because that's what I started with. And the first time I read it, I thought, the first book I just thought was amazing, start to finish. Loved it. The second book, I really felt like I had to force myself to read it. It wasn't as good as the first one, in my opinion, at the time. Now, rereading it, I thought it was better than originally. But anyway, point is, I didn't care for the second book the first time. And then the third book, like 3/4 of the third book, I didn't care for that either. But the end of the third book is one of the most perfect endings out of all the endings ever for a trilogy. And I loved it so much that I took the whole thing into my husband and I handed it to him and I said, you have to read this whole trilogy because the end of the third book is so perfect and I can't even tell you why without spoiling it. You just have to read the whole thing.
Yeah. And the overall tone of like the whole Mistborn trilogy is very depressive. Like it's a downer of a series.
So this is a good thing.
Oh no, it's
really dark.
No, it is dark. I know, but the way you made it sound, it's like, and this is a good thing. And I'm like, that's odd.
Jet?
But I
do... Craig?
Jet.
Well, I'm Seth Craig. I do agree.
Craig?
Mistborn Series 1, but I also really enjoy Mistborn Series 2, so as a collective, I would say
I knew it.
That's probably my favorite. It's honestly really hard to answer
really
this because I also really love rereading Warbreaker because of the standaloneness, and I can just read it. If I want my quick Sanderson fix, here I go. And Stormlight Archives is amazing. And yeah, this is Sanderson. There's a reason Sanderson is my favorite author. So I like all of them. I guess Mistborn is probably slightly ahead everyone else. But honestly, it's all in the same like top tier ranking because everything else I've read in my life is below all of that.
All right, for me, I have to go with Mistborn Era 2. And let me explain. Because
he likes the girl in that one.
Sanderson's writing is just top-notch across the board. I complain about Elantris a lot because it's like 90% Sanderson level. Like, it's just short of where I know he can be. And, yeah. But Mistborn Era 2, if only because the first trilogy, the incredible, epic, amazing first Mistborn trilogy, can be considered a giant world-building setup to the joke that is, in Alloy of Law, that it is perfectly reasonable for people to walk around wearing aluminum foil hats.
That doesn't make any sense
Wow.
right now. That's funny.
Here's 3 books to explain this joke.
It's so good. It is the greatest thing, and like obviously that's not where he was going with that, but still, like it's a thing that people can do. It totally makes sense in universe, and it took 3 whole books of world building to set it up.
Well, that's a good enough reason, if any.
There's also a great scene in Bands of Mourning where all of our main characters are walking into a hotel and doing their own
the Arrested Development scene
of them just driving this poor hotel owner insane in their all like 5 unique ways. Like Wax is blowing out windows in case he needs to make a quick escape. Wayne is just stealing stuff left and right and like asking this woman where she got her shoes for the next time that he needs to be a woman. Steris is going over various emergencies that she has planned for and the likelihood of them happening, including like a stampede, a flash flood, explosions. And Marassi, who should be the reasonable one, isn't. I forget what she was doing, but she was doing something amazing, and it was great. Like it was such a good scene.
I think we should be careful that is spoiler territory.
Somewhat. I mean, I didn't go into
you might not
or any reasons for any of that happening.
Usually, I'd say it's careful to even mention a character existing in a particular book if it's later on, because hey, characters die.
I mean, that's true.
No, they don't.
So pretend that I said beeps for all of those names.
Well, you can always change it in editing if you wish.
I'm not going to.
He's not going to.
No.
Yes.
Disagree. But
right.
I guess we can get into some spoilery stuff that you wanted to talk about.
Okay.
I think we did our fair share of what the Cosmere is. Hopefully excited people enough that if they have no idea, they somehow stumbled upon my channel or our podcast, but have never read Sanderson, maybe they'll be interested enough to go out and read some.
So, all right. So let's talk about known shards.
Well, just an alert for all of you listening at this point in time. We are going to get into some slight spoilers related to Sanderson's works. We'll try to be careful, I assume, talking about any major plot details, but there might be some information that you don't necessarily find out right away.
All right, good.
Okay, so I guess we're in spoiler section of the premiere episode I didn't know existed. There. This one. Don't help, let me suffer. I assume this is in reference to La Mulana. Check this series out. Enough time to read 100 plus books from The Sound of Things. I mean, we only read about 50 pages per week for the podcast. I'll probably aim to do two reviews a week, so that means you'd have to read about 100 pages a week. But also, I'll save the VODs so you don't have to listen to them. All right. Spoiler warning. That looks pretty good coming out of the back of his neck there. Cover the entire stream with this. Yes, professional streamer, do stream good. There we go. Put it right above the episode. Alright. Here we go. Spoilers begin now.
Maybe I'll be interested enough to go out and read some.
So, all right. So let's talk about known shards.
Well.
The other thing is, in Elantris, we stuck to 3 chapters a week, which sometimes was only like 20 to 30 pages. It wasn't until a couple episodes in the Mistborn where we actually stuck to like a 50-page formula. Should actually maybe keep my camera somewhat visible. Good. Alright, go in the spoiler section.
Just an alert for all of you listening at this point in time. We are going to get into some slight spoilers related to Sanderson's works. We'll try to be careful, I assume, talking about any major plot details, but there might be some information that you don't necessarily find out right away.
All right, good.
I guess if you guys think that's good.
I was planning on just sort of cutting it at a later time and dumping that in.
Okay, well now you have that if you want to preface it.
That's
okay.
Our original spoiler intro, you
known
guys.
Shards. On Cell, the planet of Elantris and Emperor's Soul, there were devotion and dominion. Some shenanigans happened there. Let's see. On the next world would be.
Well, we can mention they were shattered. We know that. That's not spoilery. Splintered. Wait, is it splintered or shattered?
Shattered. Splintered is when there's like a splinter is what the Stormfather is.
Okay. Sometimes I confuse the words.
And on Elantris, splinters are the
should you be
the shining light ball things. What are those?
Aeons.
The Aeons?
Or no?
Are they just?
They're not called
The
Aeons.
Scions?
Scions. That's the
wow,
word.
it's been a while since I read Elantris.
Are the surviving splinters of Dominion and Devotion. So on Scadrial, which is the world of Mistborn, there's Preservation and Ruin, which that's very spoilery and plot relevant to the first trilogy. On what is the name of the Warbreaker world? Nalthis. On Nalthis, there is Endowment, I want to say?
Yes.
Yes, Endowment. Okay. On Roshar, there is Honor.
Did he say Scaladriel?
And Sword of Odium. But technically, I think he was on Braze for the majority of sort of the time.
Well, he's in the same system.
Scaladriel.
So the Roshar system actually has 3 technically habitable planets. There is Roshar, where most of the main storyline takes place. There is Braze, which we get to see in little flashes and clips and stuff. And there's also Ashen, which I don't think we've ever actually seen. But yeah, those are all 3 in the sort of habitable range of the Roshar system. In addition, there is Taldane, which is the White Sands world, and that has ambition. No, that has autonomy.
Autonomy.
There's Threnody, which...
That's ambition, right?
How to explain this one?
Do we even know which shard is there?
It was ambition. That one was
ambition, right?
However, that is not ambition's homeworld. That's just where ambition got. There was sort of a fight, and it went places. That one's way more ambiguous. All we have for that system is one short story, or possibly novella. It's a very good one. It is Shadows for Silence in the Forests of Hell, which is also another decent entry point into the whole Cosmere thing. It's completely standalone.
Spoopy.
I don't know if I'd recommend it as a first Sanderson thing, though.
I don't know. It reads nice and smooth, and it's not spoilery for anything.
Have you seen Braze?
Yeah, but if I want to get people excited about reading more of Sanderson stuff, I'm not going to point them at that. I'm going to point them at Mistborn to, sort of get them interested, and then go to town with all these other stories.
Fair enough.
Oh, probably Penguin. Yeah, Epic
I had a
Graphs.
thing I was going to go to next.
I don't even recognize that
World
name.
Hoppers. Let's talk about World Hoppers. And again, not talking about Hoyd. We're leaving him out.
Well, we can briefly mention
Avoid the Hoyd.
and say we'll get into him more later.
Okay.
He's a world hopper.
That's
Hoyd
the Dominus guy.
Just bringing back the Marvel Cinematic Universe thing. Hoyd is Stan Lee.
Oh, Stan Lee. Okay. Yes, yes, he's pretty much everywhere.
He shows up in definitely every
Raises a
main
shard
book,
holder of.
and
Maybe he said race.
sometimes in short stories, sometimes not. But yeah, that's really all I want to talk about with Hoyd just yet. He's got a lot more information on him, and it would sort of eat up the whole time we have allotted for this. So world hoppers are people from worlds that aren't the one that you're on, basically. Like, they're aliens.
On. My favorite Great Lake.
Since the whole Cosmere is populated by humans, pretty much exclusively. Apparently there are dragons on one world.
Dragon steel.
I guess there's an island that is capable of communication on one of the worlds. That one's weird.
I think we could say humans and humanoids.
Fair enough. But yeah, generally speaking, if there is a character and they have a name, they are a bog standard human. Anyway,
but Parshendi would like to disagree. That's why I said humanoid.
I mean, there's some interbreeding there.
Okay,
but that's getting into spoilery stuff.
I didn't know that.
So how
did I not know that?
A world hopper?
I guess.
Craig, do you remember the things to look out for?
Sure. So of course they are traveling between different worlds. You might have read of a character in one particular book, and hey, you see another character that seems similar enough to them in a second book. They tend to stand out because of their maybe their facial features or their physique, especially their language, because that's what we have to go on. Being that this is written word, we get to see their speech patterns. Usually a character in the story that you're reading,
unfortunately, in agreement
notices these people and they seem off. They tend to have a collection of different physical traits and features.
That tripped me up for a second. I thought that was real Discord.
But they don't quite have
Victoria
that.
dropped from the call.
So they stand out. Their features don't quite match with what a character's
This is before Mike discovered streamer mode.
Location or region. And of course the speech patterns, they might stand out in certain ways because of how they try to speak or certain idioms that they use.
Soul.
Certain,
so I think those are great ways to
colorful turns of phrase.
Yeah, that's a good term to use.
It's also kind of punny if you've read all the things.
If you've read all the things.
That was something I found humorous in Words of Radiance, which I just finished. Is there's a character there that is not from Roshar, and you can tell because of all the colors.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, the main ways to spot.
She's talking about Azure, but she wasn't. Was she in Words of Radiance?
That don't really fit the.
Oh no, it was
on.
Zahel, right?
They are described as being or as looking like, say, someone from this region, except they don't have this feature. And then finally is. I'm not sure there's a third one. Is there a third one? Is there a third?
I feel like there was a third one when we were talking about this before, but I don't recall.
Yeah, I don't remember.
We're talking about world hoppers that aren't
speech patterns, physical traits. I think that's good. And of course, unless they just admit that they're from a different location.
That's the third clue.
I do want to talk about two specific world hoppers in specific, if you guys don't mind.
Okay, he's probably...
Yeah, I figured we were going to go here.
Okay, so Chris and Naz.
Oh, these guys, yeah.
Chris is
this isn't
from
too spoilery.
Taldane, the White Sands world, originally. I don't remember where Naz is from. Is he also from Taldane? Or do we know that?
He's from Threnody.
Pince Naz.
Okay. Weird.
Yeah.
That's why his name is
anyway,
Naz, because he's nosy. And Naz is French for nose. So he must be from Roshar. I mean, Scadrial.
Her assistant, basically.
Naz of
These two are responsible for any sort of in-universe documents that happen to show up in a book. Like anytime you see like a splash page of art that was collected and assembled usually collected by Naz and then assembled and annotated by Chris. In the back of most of these books, there is what's called an Ars Arcanum, which gives sort of a breakdown of
also known as secret
how
butt.
the magic system works with the information that we know from that book. That is assembled by Chris.
Ars.
So
could be Ars.
I don't know, actually. A lot of the science that we have for all of this is in-universe and assembled by an in-universe character, who we have seen on screen a couple of times. Primarily in White Sands. She's one of the main characters in that. We also see her in Mistborn Secret History. She shows up for a little bit there, along with Naz. She dances with Wax in Bands of Mourning.
Oh, yeah.
During a whole party scene. And asks him about how if his speed changes, if he changes his weight while he's flying through the air. Man, it's a whole weird thing. And then
she asked him scholarly questions. That I think is the important part.
I think.
And then Naz actually shows up in Words of Radiance for a scene.
They say weight in the book, though.
It's fairly easy to miss.
Wrong terminology.
I believe, Craig, you said that you missed it.
But it's non-scientific people doing very sciencey things with their magic.
But
Tori, have you spotted these
Wax
two
is
at all?
pretty scientific.
Well, I didn't see him in Words of Radiance. Which scene was that?
Okay, so at one point in Words of Radiance, you get an art splash page.
Oh, when he's taking
the
pictures
Bridgman's
of the scars,
tattoos.
the tattoos.
Right, and on one of the art splash pages, there was a little annotation that was signed by Naz, but
correct, and he says that he says that was like the best he could do before they chased him off. And then I think like a chapter or two later, you hear, I believe, Rock talking to Kaladin about how there was an Ardent that was bothering us and we had to run him off. And that was Naz. So yeah, like all of like the science that we have on all of this stuff is from these two people primarily.
So there actually is an in-universe reason for this information to be revealed and to exist. It's not necessarily from Sanderson. I mean, obviously it's from Sanderson in general, but it's supposed to be a character's information or perspective about information that they determined themselves.
Right, and I find the whole concept to be incredibly intriguing. Like, obviously Sanderson has all this info, and he could give it to us in a big info dump at the back. But he has chosen to do it this way, and I find that very, very interesting. Oh, all right. Thanks, everybody, for listening. You can find us on Twitter at CosmereCast. We also have a Facebook group. Either of these is good to follow. You don't really need to do both because they get the same info. I update before we get ready to record. I will put announcements on there once we have, the website up and episodes out, sort of let you know as they get released. We will have a Patreon eventually. I want to wait until I actually have the website up and a few episodes out before I put that together.
Okay, as far as releases, obviously these are like all out here. But if you wanted to find releases of current episodes, we finished Oathbringer, we're doing Dawn Shard currently right now. So if you're interested in live episodes, and he's also talking about the Patreon. The Patreon exists now. It didn't at the time of this recording. And that's that. If you go to the Patreon page, you can just look at it. You don't have to donate any money. There's a link to the Discord server on there. You can stay up to date with current episodes. As far as the re-listens, those will be happening Tuesdays at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. And I'll probably do 2 episodes each Tuesday evening. That way I have like kind of an earlier time for European listeners, but I'll still have one that's late enough for USian listeners. Or maybe I'll actually just break it up and do like a 4 and a 7 and not have it be a contiguous stream. Anyway. This.
There will also be
release is Oathbringer chapter 115.
Which
okay.
Tori, you wanted to handle the thanking for the theme music. Do you have that handy?
No, I don't have it handy, but we'll record it before we post it.
Okay, I'll get that from you later. Craig, you got anything?
Is he talking?
We do the recordings live, usually on my Twitch channel. Well, not usually. It will be on my Twitch channel, Jet082. And yeah, you get to hear us live and all of our goofs and mistakes.
Yeah, all the stuff that Mike's going to edit out.
Appreciate some viewers joining us live to help correct us and provide, faster information than we can remember it with our stupid human brains.
Plus any good questions or comments.
Questions and comments are great. Any sort of chat interaction is pretty wonderful. But I think that's all for today, so have a good one.
Bye.
Bye. This has been the Cosmere Deep Dive Podcast. Follow us on Twitter at CosmereCast, or like us on Facebook. Our theme music is Traveling Made Up Continents by Gillicuddy, used with permission. Hear more from him at the Free Music Archive. Thanks for listening.
All right, the next one on Spotify is episode 2. It's an hour and 43 minutes. Why? I guess that's crazy.